Okay, well, let's talk about lecture 4, part 4, and this is really about marginal benefits equaling marginal costs as another tool to think about things. So if we draw a graph, and let's say we're going to put quantity of whatever it happens to be. We could say quantity of any good or service. And when we list it like this and we think about it in terms of supply and demand, recall we had supply and we had demand, and we had our market equilibrium, we had our market quantity, we had our market price, we had our consumer surplus, we had our producer surplus, and together, if we were to add those up, those areas, that was our total gains from trade. If we were to restrict quantity to, say, only this range, then that area there represented our deadweight loss. But the key was this was sellers and this was buyers, right? So it was both sides of the market. But when you think about it this way, and you think about it in terms of marginal benefits and marginal costs, now what we're really thinking about is just you. You're deciding how much to choose. These represents the marginal benefits, and they're declining because of diminishing rates of return. There's your marginal costs, and it's increasing because of increased opportunity costs. The more you do something, the more you consume something, leaves less available for other things you'd want. And now what we have is, again, the area in which you'd stop, the equilibrium, where marginal benefits equal marginal costs. You would consume this amount. And what's key here is that everything to the left is where your marginal benefits exceed your marginal costs. So your benefits exceed your costs, so you should keep consuming until they're just equal. And then on this side is when your marginal costs exceed your marginal benefits, and you are over consuming if you're on this part. But the interesting thing here is now we, again, our gains from consumption are, again, this triangle, except this triangle now is going to you in the sense that these are your costs of consuming. These are your benefits for consuming. You decide when you're going to stop, which would be this rule right here, right at that equilibrium. But all that benefits, all those gains from consuming are going to you because those are your costs and those are your benefits. And so now if I say, well, I'm sorry, you can only consume one of these, or Q bar, you can only consume that amount. Again, this represents deadweight loss, but that deadweight loss is strictly to you. So the difference then between thinking about things in terms of supply and demand is here we're thinking about the market itself, right? We're thinking about market exchange, and supply and demand represent the two sides of the market. And this set then represents you, your decision. And it could also represent a whole country. It could also represent a whole community. The key is that we're making a decision on how much of this to consume, given we have a marginal cost and we have a marginal benefits curve. So if we're thinking about a problem, say in terms of, protecting biodiversity. So let's put biodiversity here. And by biodiversity, I mean the web of life, all the different animals involved. The marginal benefits might look very steep in the sense that biodiversity might be very important to you. The marginal costs might be sitting out here. And we might say, well, that's how much biodiversity I'm going to demand. These are the benefits that accrue to me personally. But society would say, well, you're ignoring all the benefits that you providing some kind of biodiversity on, say, your yard. Maybe you're planting different flowers so bees can come and pollinate, and you're not really thinking about all the pollination goods that spill across all your neighbors. So in fact, the marginal benefits to society are out here, and ideally what we should get is some level of biodiversity out here. And what you are ignoring with your own personal decision, let's call that A, when we want to be at B, is you would be ignoring these social benefits that go to other members of society. So by producing at this level, you are under providing biodiversity. That's a market failure, right? That's a market failure. And in this case, it's a market failure because this represents a positive externality, this shift in the marginal benefits curve out here, and we're ignoring that. We are not paying attention to it. If we did pay attention to it, now our total gains would be both of these areas right here, okay? So, and that's a positive externality. A negative externality would be the case, and let's just think for a second of driving an automobile, a car of some type. And here's your marginal benefits from driving your car, miles drive. Here's your cost, which can represent the money you use. We'll call that your private costs. And again, you may drive, say, this many miles because you're getting all this benefit here, this triangle. But what you're ignoring is your CO2 emissions from the car, which is contributing to climate change. And so the marginal costs to society would sit out here. And now we're going from A to C, or let's call it, since I got a C down here, let's just call it B again, A to B. And what society would want is for you to cut back on carbon emissions. And instead of the true benefits going to you of this, the fact that you are ignoring what's happening to other people, you're ignoring these costs that you're imposing on the rest of the world. So the benefits that would go to you then would be this amount, because this is really not a benefit to you. It's a cost that you're getting that benefit by imposing a cost on the rest of the world. And so in this case, what happens is, again, it's a market failure. And this would be a negative externality. Right? And the idea is if you're at A, you are driving too much. Too much given social costs. Now you can say, well, I don't really care about what my driving does to global climate change. It's not my problem. Well, yeah, it is your problem in the sense that we're all on the same planet. And the fact is, if everybody is sitting here driving at C, then the costs are going to be, you're either going to pay for the costs today in terms of less driving, or you're going to pay for the costs at some time out in the future, because what's going to happen is you're going to have to pick up the tab then. Now, if something is so bad in terms of cost. Like let's say DDT, which was a pesticide used in the 40s and 50s. And the problem with DDT was what it did was thin the eggs or thin the shells of bird eggs, which caused bird populations to go way down. And so DDT is a pretty powerful pesticide. And in this case, here's our marginal benefits from using DDT. Here is our marginal costs. So in this case, we were using this much DDT, and we were getting these benefits. But the true cost, in a lot of people's opinion, was the marginal costs were straight like this. Boom. Marginal cost of society. So that the only acceptable limit would be 0, right? And so going from now A to B, all those benefits that went to you are just being transferred as pure cost to the rest of the world. And so you would, the economists would even argue that you'd have to put a ban on this particular product. And we do it all the time. Smoking marijuana, selling marijuana, growing marijuana in Wyoming. It may be here if we opened up a free market, but given we think that the costs are not here, but up here, we set the legal limit at 0. Now, Colorado, they have a different story. They would say, well, maybe the marginal costs are more like here, and what we're going to do is not allow as much, but we're still going to allow some level, which is a lot closer to A than shutting down the market completely. Okay, so just to recap, supply demand, they look the same, but what we're really talking about is a market and the buyers and the sellers, two sides of the market. When we use marginal benefits and marginal costs, we're thinking about an entity, be it a person, a firm, a country, a city, a family, with the idea they're making trade-offs between marginal benefits they get from consuming something and the marginal costs they face. And all that total gains now is going to the family, as long as all the benefits and all the costs are accruing to the family. But once you introduce the idea of a market failure where you have a difference in, say, marginal private benefits and the marginal social benefits, you have a wedge in what the market is providing, that's considered a market failure. Same story can happen with costs. In this case, the true costs of consuming, in this case, driving your car, are higher than the private costs because you are imposing a negative externality on the rest of the world. The market has failed because it's overproduced the amount of driving that happens. Or in some cases, if we think that the costs to society are so big, we see the marginal cost curve as essentially being this straight vertical line. We put a complete ban on it. So this would be a market failure in that A is way too much. What we really want is 0. All right, so that is lecture 4, part 4. Again, questions, send me an email and we can talk about them.